Go on to our webinar. Our first speaker in today's webinar is Dr. Balamurgan, who would be dwelling on uveitis clinical approach and workup for diagnosis. He is the Chief of Uvea Services, Arvind Eye Care Systems at Pondicherry. On to you, Doctor. Could you share your screen? Dr. Balamurgan?
For giving me this opportunity to present under the aegis of AOS. The topic allotted to me is clinical approach and workup of uveitis. Slides are not moving. The journey matters more than the goal. The way to solve a problem is more important than the actual solution. This is what Dr. Mahatma Gandhi had said. So whenever a patient of uveitis walks into my clinic, the first thing I make sure to be done is it uveitis or am I handling a case of pseudo uveitis? Because pigment dispersion, pseudo exfoliation, even diabetes, which is uncontrolled or uncontrolled hyperlipidemia and ocular ischemic syndrome could masquerade as uveitis, and we shouldn't be treating with a lot of steroids and powerful medicines. So we need to make sure that we are not mistreating a pseudo uveitis. Yes, the perspectives of uveitis are really important for any newcomer. Uveitis is multifactorial. It could be infectious, autoimmune, or masquerade, or other multiple causes. And surprisingly, it has a lot of autoimmune associations. It can cause sequelae like cataract, glaucoma, CME, and so many other sequelae as well. And we need to have a specific approach to treat as well as the sequelae. And in this armamentarium of treatment, we have various drugs starting from steroids, specific anti-infectives, immunosuppressives, as well as biologicals. So this panoramic approach in uveitis is very important for a clinician because we will be doing certain tests to identify the etiology, certain tests before starting the treatment, certain tests to fix out the autoimmune association as well as order in relevance to the specific sequelae of the uveitis. With this in mind, the first important step is meticulous history taking. It should start with age, gender, race, and as well as the pertaining to the ocular complaints, moving on to the systemic history, treatment history, and other miscellaneous causes. So how important is age? In children, we all know that JRA and toxocariasis are so common, whereas in young adults, HLA-B27, Behçet's, and Fuchs are commonly associated, whereas in the old age, we have VKH, herpes, tuberculosis, and leprosy. Gender has also a relevance in uveitis. In males, sympathetic ophthalmia, Behçet's, and ankylosing are so common, whereas SLE, JRA, and rheumatoid are predominant in females. So ethnicity is also a relevance in uveitis because in examination, while you are presenting a long case, this question is also asked because ankylosing readers are common in Caucasians, in the pigmented race and sarcoid is common, whereas in the Orientals, BKH and Behçet's is so common. Socioeconomic conditions are also relevant. History of contact with cat is relevant with respect to toxoplasmosis. Contact with dog is relevant in toxocariasis, other cattle in leptospira and cysticercosis, so also contact with pigs. So small things makes perfection, but perfection is never a small thing. So we need to focus on examination of each of the ocular structures, starting from the forehead adnexa, moving on to the conjunctiva, cornea, iris, pupil, and including the gonioscopic evaluation. All these details are available in various literature resources, but we need to get our perspective correct, what all we are going to look up in the examination of uveitis. Look around the eye as well. For example, poliosis could point to VKH or sympathetic. Loss of hair could be there in SLE, VKH, and syphilis. There are so many other conditions, including the dermatological associations like rashes, hypopigmentation, erythema nodosum, scaling of the skin. So in doing so, we should never lose sight of the forest for the trees, because we also need to correlate the eye problem with the systems as well. For example, the clue from the history like oral genital lesions or oral ulcers alone could give us a distinction whether we are dealing with Behçet's, Reiter's and syphilis or a SLE or inflammatory bowel diseases. So also we get a lot of information from the discoid lesions of the skin or the nail abnormalities or the history of urethral discharge or history of epididymitis or prostatitis. So we also need to team up with the internists because a lot of the systemic association could present from the history as well. So, or in the general examination, if you see a cartilage loss, we need to focus or act. Are we dealing with relapsing polychondritis or a syphilis or a gonococcal diseases? So people could think at this picture as a big cobweb, but there are also a lot of pearls. So these pearls could help us to unravel the enigma of uveitis. What are those secrets? Whenever there is no posterior synechiae, please be sure that you are possibly dealing with the case of Fuchs uveitis. Any synechiae rules out Fuchs uveitis. Similarly, no peripheral anterior synechiae, please think, are we dealing with Posner's Glassman? Leptobehçets are mostly non-granulomatous and can never be a granulomatous disease process. TB sarcoid leprosy can initially start as non-granulomatous and change its picture to granulomatous. Lepto can never have a chorioretinal lesion. See, because the chorioretinal lesion is an exclusion criteria for leptospira. Similarly, VKH can never be unilateral. Think, are we dealing with the posterior scleritis or its differentials? Hansen's is mostly anterior uveitis because the posterior segment is considered as a hotter structure and the bacillus prefer the cooler structures. When we see flare more than cells by more than 2 degrees, we have to think, are we dealing with a retinal detachment induced uveitis? Activity of uveitis is very important to plan the treatment, and the practical pearl is look for the mobility of the cells. Whenever any lesion is well defined, possibility of inactivity is very high. Ill-defined is active. In between, we have various degrees of spectrum. Yes, there are certain subtle signs to look for like hypopyon, hyphema, or even the irregularities of the anterior chamber, which could give subtle clues to the clinician. The findings which are commonly overlooked are the subtle iris atrophy or the AVF cells. AVF cells could give us a wonderful clue regarding the activity of retinal vasculitis or the intermediate and posterior uveitis. So ordering an investigation, planning DDs, comparing the existing pattern may look difficult, but once we define the problem of uveitis based on the Nausick's suggestion and go along with the Sun nomenclature, ordering investigation becomes like a mathematical riddle, and we can have a set of differentials. We compare with the existing uveitis pattern and go along with a specific plan of treatment. To recap, this is what meshing and system suggested by Nausick is we first name the problem, group it and get a meshing system in place and order a specific lab test, go along with a specific consultation and plan a treatment. More importantly, follow the patient whether you are going on track or not. Investigations of uveitis may not be required if the etiology is clear, or if you deal with a traumatic anterior uveitis or a Fuchs uveitis or a first attack of low-grade uveitis. If you don't order the correct diagnostic test, sometimes there can be a lot of mishap like this. This is a patient, my own patient, in my absence was treated by my substitute and presenting as a granulomatous anterior uveitis. Look what happened with topical steroids, a fulminant keratouveitis. So the history that was missed was history of native treatment with lactose cotton phenol blue, the fungal uveitis was confirmed. So we need to be very, very careful. Sometimes we need not read articles to investigate uveitis. If you see a worm in the anterior chamber, the history of poor hygiene, definitely the treatment is very, very simple and straightforward. Remove the worm and see under the microscope to identify the subspecies. Subtle findings really matter. In the same eye, if you see a peripherally shallow and centrally deep, make sure are we dealing with a cyclitic membrane, which is commonly overlooked, and order an UBM, ultrasound biomicroscopy. The configuration of KPs are very, very important for the clinician to pick up the etiology. For example, you see a large gravitational distribution mutton fat configuration, definitely you are sure that are we dealing with the TB or sarcoid or toxoplasmosis.
1 minute left.
Yes, sir. So on and so forth. Even the iris nodules give a wonderful clue. Copies could be there in both granulomatous and non-granulomatous. Basaka definitely indicates a granulomatous pathology. The angle capice indicates a sarcoid, and you will be doing a gonioscopy for the PAS. Lish nodules, you need to investigate for neurofibromatosis. Brushfield's flex gives a clue of Down syndrome and not mistreating as uveitis. And sometimes the danger signs like the sentinel vessels could give a pointer as masquerade, and the hypopyon, which is irregular in surface with blood vessels, gives us a clue. Poor response to topical steroids could give us a clue to do a PCR and look for the beaded fibrin strand, which could be there in P. acnes and also in fungal sarcoid and toxoplasma. Shifting hypopyon is seen in Behçet's. It's very important for the clinician to detect the Behçet's shifting hypopyon. And sometimes post IVTA, you get hypopyon looking uveitis, but characteristically there is no congestion here. And the non-shifting hypopyon is commonly seen in an infective condition. This is called as a head tilt test to differentiate whether we are dealing with an infective or a non-infective. And even the color of the hypopyon is very important. When you see a dark colored hypopyon, think about Listeria or Serratia, even atypical mycobacteria. There are so many other organisms with the specific colors. And to sum up, characterize the uveitis as acute, chronic, more importantly, granulomatous, non-granulomatous. And you will be annoyed when somebody says cataract. We need to describe immature, mature. So also in uveitis, characterizes granulomatous and non-granulomatous. Order a baseline workup, keeping in mind that TB syphilis can present as any type of uveitis. The common baseline workup includes a total count, differential count, ESR, which is commonly neglected or overlooked. Even the test for TB, PPD, or IgRA, test for syphilis includes both a specific and a non-specific test. Go in for chest imaging as and when needed, and include serum AC whenever you're suspecting sarcoid and its DDs. So to conclude, we need to have joy in doing something beautiful. Hope you enjoyed my slides. Thank you so much. Madam, kindly unmute.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Balmurugan. There was a lot of clarity in your talk, and actually, some of my questions got answered in the process. So one thing comes clear, that even a history or even skin lesions or the least of the informations can help you get to a diagnosis. I have one question before I would go on to the expert panel to ask their questions. What's the role of knowing positive or negative predictive values of each test before ordering a battery of tests which are indicated in a uveitis workup? Any of the expert panel could take the answer to?
May I answer?
Yes.
For example, PPD test like MANTU, quantiferon, is got a very low predictivity rate because it's common in that Indian population. Like 30 to 40% of the patient, normal Indian population is MANTU positive or quantiferon TB gold positive. So this is quite important. And serum angiotensin converting enzyme can be positive in tuberculosis also. So it doesn't really distinguish between the sarcoid and TB. We did a study of 700 patients, and we didn't find that the serum AC is very specific for sarcoid. And that's also today's literature says. May I make some 2 or 3 comments?
Yes.
So one of the things is the examinations, like, that uveitis cases, you should not see in the dim light. You should have the room light on when you first face the uveitis patient. And then in the slit lamp examination, as he has mentioned, anterior vitreous cells is very important. If you see the predominant anterior vitreous cells, you should think about intermediate uveitis than anterior uveitis, which can be spillover. And the history taking, you may need to go back and forth. For example, if you see a granulomatous uveitis, you should ask history of contact with the TB and any history of fever, previous history of TB, etc. And he has mentioned that the first attack of anterior uveitis doesn't require any investigations. That's not really the thing which we do. If we say non-granulomatous uveitis, yes, but this granulomatous uveitis is used always with a cause. So here, if you see a granulomatous uveitis, you need to investigate even at the first attack. That's all.
Dr. Vaishali, do you have any question to ask before we go on to our next speaker?
Not really. I'm good.
Okay. Dr. Avinash?
Yeah, just to elaborate on the last point, what Dr. Biswas had mentioned. So what a postgraduate should know in terms of when to investigate a patient who comes with anterior uveitis for the first time. So what Balmurugan had clearly mentioned, that low-grade anterior uveitis when the patient comes for the first time, that's a very typical indication when we don't have to investigate. And like what Dr. Biswas has mentioned, so the real indications is, even if the first attack is, if they are come in extremes of age, even if they come in the first attack, then it's an indication when we have to investigate. If the patient presents with granulomatous uveitis, then it's a time to investigate. And if there is some sort of you get a sense that is there some systemic involvement to it, so again it's we have to go for it. So these are the times when we should not think that the contemporary teaching where first attack of anterior uveitis one does not have to investigate. So there are some outliers, and these are few of those indications.
I agree with Avinash. These days, any attack of uveitis has to be seen, phenotype determined, and investigated. The investigations have to be very tailored, not exhaustive investigations, but it's a very old teaching that first attack we don't investigate.
Thank you.